Hi, this is Cliff Bramble. I am here to do an intro for you for Analyzing Labor, Chapter 13 on the business side of restaurants. So, welcome very much. I'd like to introduce myself. I am the author of the book. We have it available for paperback now on Amazon. Hardcover is coming out in the next 5 to 8 weeks, which will be probably mid to end of September. And we also have a PDF version if you're interested in purchasing the PDF version at hungryhospitality.com. So this particular chapter is really all about analyzing labor. And I have the book over here, the hardcover here. I'm looking at it and just kind of talking to you a little bit about the chapters and what I have in it. This particular chapter is one that's very important to a restaurant. Analyzing labor is highly important no matter what restaurant you're in, because you need to know if you're doing fantastic and if you need to know where the issues are as well. Now, what drives the labor? The sales will drive the labor. So if you have great sales, you shouldn't have any issue when it comes down to the labor. But at the same time, you always want to make sure that you're making sure that you have the right labor at the right time. So in this particular chapter on page 115, I start out and I kind of talk about, and 116, I talk about the kitchen labor first. And I give some examples on there. And in addition to that, I also talk about the different breaking down and drilling down where the specific issues are in a kitchen. If it was the dish position, or was it the guy in the prep, or was it somebody on the front line? Where was the issue? And that's kind of, I talk about that as well. In here, I also have some formulas on labor, which is really good that you have to understand about the scheduling versus the actual, and the scheduling to forecast rather than just scheduling a bunch of labor. Because if you're scheduling a schedule and you're putting a bunch of people on the schedule without even knowing your sales, and you're over scheduling, you already have a problem. You want to make sure that you're scheduling your 15% labor. If you're scheduling 18% labor, well, you're probably going to get 18%. But if you schedule 15%, the goal would be to hopefully you get in 15% labor. And that talks about it in this particular chapter. And in addition to that, I also talk about the hourly labor averaging. And that's always important, because if you know the average labor of each position, you can, or the entire restaurant, it'll just be able to compute it in your head as well. And that's very helpful too. Now, I also have information on page 124 about the front of the house labor, and I talk about the tip credit states. I think there's 13 or 14, maybe even 15 states that still have tip credits available. Georgia is one of them. That's where I reside, and we're fortunate to have a $7.25 per person average rate, that, or not average rate, but the minimum I should be saying. A lot of things going in my mind right now. So the average rate and for everybody is $7.25, which basically is the minimum wage. But when it comes down to service positions, as long as they're making that much on a tip basis, there's not an issue. So we have something called the tip credit, where we only have to pay the server or server assistant or even a bartender $2.13 plus their tips. It goes on to talk about that. Now, remember, a lot of people think that's all they're making. They're not making that. They're making $25 to $40 per hour in a lot of restaurants. Also talks about examples about the payroll, explaining to you what you have to look at when you get the payroll reports in, because if you're not paying attention to the payroll reports and comparing them to what your dollars and hours were on your POS reports, you can end up with an issue. They should be the same and they should match. I also talk about another one of those funny stories in the restaurant. I talk about a drifter by the name of Travis. He was an interesting fellow, harmless guy. It seemed like he was harmless, but when his tattoos start right over here at his ear and they go around all the way around his neck, everywhere except his face, like I say in the book, he has a lot more street experience than I do. I also talk about some labor-saving tips in this book, and payroll companies, and also management labor as well. So when it comes down to it, paying attention to your labor and making sure that everything is in line is highly important. It's up to you to pay attention to it, and that's really what this chapter is. So that's what I have in this particular chapter. I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you at chapter 14.